I love a good underdog story, and it's part of why I thoroughly enjoy interviewing my next guest. I'm John Grease, the third founder of Garage Life Media, and we're all about athletes who train at home. So it was a pleasure to interview World's Strongest Man competitor Stan Carradine a few weeks after he competed at the Mammoth Strength Pro-Am Challenge 5. We had a great conversation talking about how he got started in the sport of strongman. Now, Stan doesn't currently have a sponsor, so we talked about how he budgets and works a second job to be able to afford to travel to compete. On the training front, Stan explained how practicing yoga improved his performance in stone events. And because it was Black History Month when we did the interview, we talked about why there's never been a black World's Strongest Man competitor. Stan, man, thank you for waking up after what I assume was a late night. I've been there before. I've had that lifestyle, had to bounce and then had to get up early in the morning. So thank you so much for waking up early to talk to me about the sport of strongman.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
I knew as soon as I saw your training, I said, this dude's in the home gym. We are going to have a conversation. So I'm excited right now.
Awesome.
How did you feel about your performance at the Mammoth? And that was your first time competing there, right?
That was my first time competing at the Mammoth. It wasn't my best, but it was an experience. So there's always, with any show, there's always something that's either good or bad. There's always the best outcomes or always the worst outcome. Being from Colorado, there were, I want to say, 4 other people from Colorado that competed, 2 or 3 in the Masters and 1 that was in the Open Amateur, and then myself. So it's the second time I've competed on dirt, but
okay, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, this time it was more compact, but then if something fell, it dug up.
Okay.
Where I competed in dirt, the first time was actually in Giants Live, Indiana, the first one that they had. And it was 96 to 99 degrees hot. So
yeah, that ain't cool.
Yeah, you're just breathing humidity, and then we're sucking in all the dirt that's flying up in the air. This at the Mammoth was way better than competing in Indiana just because of that. So, but it was totally awesome. So I like how everything ran. It ran pretty smooth for the most part. A couple of hiccups, but nothing too big.
Strongman is actually a strength and endurance event because you're doing so much cardio stuff that hits your cardio, right? Do you think that you get an advantage from living in Colorado at high elevations?
There is a bit of an advantage here. The best part about it is that my recovery time is a lot faster. Now, the only sucky part about this was I had COVID, and it really messed with my breathing for the entire time that me and my family had it. So had COVID, got back to training, and it was a very hard time trying to catch my breath. So it actually led into going into the Mammoth. And the only thing that kind of saved me was I have an inhaler. Just even before COVID, I've had an inhaler. So having that helped out. But then being in the higher altitude, the recovery time for me is a lot faster than some people. So it's like we're breathing, we're tired, people are trying to suck wind, so I can take 2 to 3, 4 breaths and then I'm ready to go again. Just like I said, but the only part with having COVID this time, it really messed me up, and I wasn't expecting it to be like that. But as long as I was able to get a hit of my inhaler, I was up and ready to go again.
What are some things that you had to do as you were coming back to training after having COVID in order to be able to because you got an important show coming up and you got COVID or you're recovering from COVID. What were some things that you had to modify in your training to be able to still compete at the Mammoth?
A lot of the modifying was it went from being just heavy, super heavy weight to a few reps to a lot of reps. I almost turned into a CrossFitter just so I could try to get that breathing part back. And that,
you take your shirt off for no reason? Put on an ugly headband.
If I got a garage gym, I can do that myself. I ain't got no mirrors around, so it was like, let me take this off. No, I did a lot of, fast movements, stuff like that, a lot of step ups, a lot of jumps, a lot of lightweight squats. When I say lightweight, it's 405 to 585, anywhere from 10 to 15 reps, and just to where I could get that heavy breathing. And when I was done, it's like try to control my breathing, try to get everything going again. Log press, the axle press, I would do clean and press over and over and over again. And literally, I was like, I want to videotape it and show up. And I'm like, yeah, somebody's gonna be like, did you just switch over to CrossFit? And so I said, we're gonna leave that out. I don't want that out there. But that was the biggest part of my training, was switching that up. And then once I started getting used to the breathing part, then I started coming back down to where it was, okay, we got the one rep, let's go like that. And then work on things like that. So it was a big transition, something that I'm not used to, but it was more of going back to, we are athletes, but it was more going back to that real football wrestling kind of athlete, to where you're just going and going and going, you stop, you get a second breather, you're going back in. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't want to keep doing it. The first time doing it, I wanted to stop. I almost called Dave and said, hey, I'm not gonna make it. This COVID hit me hard, and um, I don't know what to do. And I'm talking to my wife, she's saying, no, you can do it. And I'm like, hey, you're not breathing the way
Yeah,
I
you're
am.
not the one over here struggling.
The first day I came back and I did 135-pound squats, and I came back in, I'm limping, and she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I swear it feels like I just did an 800-pound squat for 3. And she's like,
Wow.
yeah, it's that bad right now. And it took me the whole entire week just to get used to doing all this stuff again.
It's interesting that you went back to that, almost like you were doing like the football two-a-days thing to try to get back in shape. Whereas I think conventional wisdom would have said, well, we're going to ease back into training, not push it or whatever. But you got a competition coming up. So you're like, well, I ain't about that life. I got to do well at this competition. And I know that the Mammoth was important because as a pro strongman, you guys don't really get a lot of chances to compete
No,
in the United States. You got to you've competed in China, Canada, South Africa. Am I missing anywhere?
China, South Africa, Canada, Finland, Russia, and I want to say that's it. And then around the United States.
Yeah, so this was a big deal because you get to compete with most of the top strongman competitors in the United States in one spot. Let's go back in time a little bit. You competed for 5 years before turning pro. And I know that you said your goal was to turn pro before you turned 31. And you turned pro in 2013, I believe. But as you look back, what do you think the benefit to you was in being an amateur for 5 straight years?
It helps you watch the sport grow and everything change. And looking at it as a pro now, you still see it grow. But when I was competing, I'd see all the guys like Travis Ortmeyer, one of the bigger guys.
Who you competed against at the Mammoth? Because how was that to you grow up seeing this guy and now you're competing against him?
It's the second time I competed with him, and the first time was at America's Strongest Man in Arizona. And so he walks in, and I'm one of those guys that I see those kind of people and I get starstruck. So I was just like,
okay,
I just watched TV like not too long ago. So
yeah.
He comes in, and it's like, Travis, it's nice to meet you, yada yada yada. Find out he's like a super cool guy. So back in that time when I was an amateur, it's watching those guys, seeing how they've developed in the sport growing up and everything like that, and seeing the weights change and seeing how fast we can go from a heavyweight having a 700-pound yoke to the time right before I turned pro, hey, we're moving a 1,000-pound yoke. Okay. And so I'm like, okay, it's only been 5 years. I think we need to progress. Yeah. But it made you, it kind of helped me say, you know what, I know where I want to be at a certain time. Let me set a goal for myself. Okay. You got a lot of guys now who want to compete. They're just like, oh, I want to turn pro. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you right now, just compete for a minute. Get used to it. Get used to all these events that out of nowhere come up for some odd reason. Before it was never a bag toss. We had keg toss. We had the stones to a platform, never stone to shoulder, stuff like that. So every event has changed. Every event has evolved. We've seen so many different implements come out, from a beast metal log to a pit bull log to whatever they are, big dog log, so it's all developed rapidly and great in a good way. It just made me say, let me sit back, let me make myself better before really saying I want to go pro and compete against these bigger guys. I'm on the shorter side.
Yeah, because you're 5'10", right?
You're 5'10". The average guy is about 6 foot, 6'1". So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to compete against these guys, I really got to know what I'm doing. So when I finally said, you know what, I told my family, I said, hey, I want to turn pro before I turn 30. That's the goal. So everybody's like, okay. My mom was like, okay, I'm on board. And I said, but if I'm going to do it, I got to do it the right way. I got to make sure I can move all this weight, stuff like that. And from that time, it was literally 2 to 3 years of saying, let me keep doing this. And then finally it was 2013. I said, my goal now is to go to nationals. That's the first goal before turning pro. I'm gonna go to nationals, qualify for nationals. And the nationals I went to was Denison, Texas, and it was 150 heavyweights. So it was a 2 or 3 day event, and one of the heavier nationals I've seen. And so in that entire class of heavyweights, we had Casey Garrison, who turned pro at that show. Martins Licis we didn't really know who he was.
Yeah, everybody knows who he is now.
Everybody knows who he is now. And so I didn't realize it until like he had a biography, and I'm like, he was at that show. I was at that show. Wow. And there's so many pros that have came from that nationals. I'm like, that was a very huge show. And so when I just competed, I got to it. I said, I'm gonna compete for fun. There's no real thought of saying, well, I'm gonna go to try to compete to get to the Arnold. When we finished off the day, you know, you're looking at the rankings, and I'm telling my family, I'm like, I think I'm at 15th, and we had stones. So I said, well, I suck at stones, so this is where I drop.
Yeah.
But it was okay enough to only drop me down 5 places. So it dropped me down from 15th to 20. And it kept me in the alternate stage for the Arnold. Didn't really think about it. And once they go through the whole thing, sending out their invites for the Arnold, there's going to be a few guys that can't go. And so Dion ended up sending me an invite saying, hey, do you want to go to the Arnold? And I'm shocked. I'm like, are you serious? Okay, well, yeah. Let me start doing some calculations and see what I can get for money. And
you noticed the stand, right? You know, you email the stand. You know that, right?
Yeah. So I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, sure. And so it all came down to I just didn't have the funds for it. So that right there, I said, okay, well, maybe I am good enough to turn pro. Next year, that's when we're going to go for it. And so Louisiana popped up. There was a Plat Plus, and that was the Plat Pluses that they actually get you pro cards. And so head down there, and sure enough, I had Trey Mitchell, who's a pro now, Alan Colley, he's a pro, and then a few other guys, Luke Kane Herrick, who he's competed in SCL and one of the bigger log pressers. So I'm like, these guys are huge, they're brutes, and we competed, and it was a very hard fought out battle between all of us. Trey gave me a run for my money, Alan gave me a run for my money, all of them did. And it just came down to the last couple of events, and sure enough, I got my pro card, and I was like, all right, well, that's it. But I'm always looking back and saying, you know what, I became a pro for a reason. And like you said, the first 5 years, it was, let me look back at this and see what I did to actually get here. Let me continue to stay humble and do this and keep moving forward. As much as I want to be one of the popular pros, I don't have that concept yet. I don't have it to where I have a gigantic 1,000-pound deadlift. I don't have the 480-pound log yet. You know, I don't have that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to build myself as continually going on with this and saying, you know what, one day we're going to be there. Now, the sad part about it is that I started somewhat late in the game, and a lot of these guys started in their early 20s. I started in my late 20s. So I'm 38 now, and I'm starting to feel it. But I still try to have that mentality of saying, you know what, I'm still strong. I could go in there and I could do this, and look to where we came from, look to what we've done. We've made some leaps and bounds, that things that I've never done before, and things I thought I would never do. So I always look back at those first times before I came pro and say, we've done this before and we could do it again.
Reacting to what you said, it sounds like you probably didn't even plan it this way, but you actually systematically turned yourself into a strongman, because it sounds like, number one, you play football, so you created an athletic base.
Yeah.
For anybody watching this, pay attention to what I'm about to say. You created an athletic base. Then you competed in powerlifting for several years. You ended up with a 750-pound bench press.
Yeah.
Okay, which is respectable. I mean, I'm assuming that was equipped lifting.
That was with my bench shirt, yeah.
Yeah, but nevertheless, what was your raw bench?
550.
Okay, yeah. So you still got street cred. So anyway, so you built a strength base, which also involves not just it's not just about being stronger. It's also the fact that your joints get thicker, your tendons
Yes.
and ligaments have time to accustom themselves to heavy weight, to
Yes.
the stresses of heavy weight. So you had athletic base, then you built up a base of strength, and then you practiced the technique of the sport you wanted to compete in, which is strongman, for 5 years
Yeah.
before saying, I'm going to turn pro. I don't believe you've had a lot of injuries,
No,
and hopefully you don't.
nothing too serious. So,
And so I'm going to say, like, well, think about all these people who got injured, like who typically get injured in the sport. But then I'm saying, well, maybe that's because some of them don't have that background
yeah,
that I just described for you.
that kind of stuff, building, having all that to where your football, wrestling, track, whatever it is, and then you move on to another sport of strength conditioning before you get into the real sport that you want to do always helps. And like I tell a lot of people, I said, there is no easy button. As much as we want there to be an easy button, there's not. You got to do the work. You're going to have to develop yourself. 5 years in the making of going from whatever age that was to the point I said I want to turn pro. It took some time, as much as I wanted to be in the limelight and saying, hey, I'm a pro, this is this. And I couldn't. I said, you know what, I'm not ready for it. There was a couple of shows I looked at and I said, I can't do that. And there's a few guys I know that will say, I think I could do that weight. I said, well, do you think you could do it or do you know you can do it? I said, there's two differences. I said, if you know you can move a 1,000-pound yoke, let's say in 10 seconds. All right, cool. If you can't, don't do it. Work on it. There's no need to jump to it right now. But there's a lot of guys who always want that easy button and get ready to go on it. So I just say, well, we'll see how you do.
Do you pick shows based upon what you know you're good at? Like you see the list of events, or do you pick shows because they're going to develop you as a competitor?
Since we're, like you said before, with pros, we only have so many shows a year. And if I see a show that it's got a great pressing event, a great yoke event, something, car deadlift, stuff like that, I'm all gun ho for it. I will go for it. But then again, there's always the shows where there's a stone series. I hate stones, but you know what? I'm never going to get better at it if I don't do it. So might as well give it a whirl and see what I can do. And so there's always the challenging part of it, of saying, yeah, it may suck. I may suck at it, but I'll give it a go. I'm not going to be the best at it, but I'll give it a go. I'm going to try to get middle of the pack and see what I get.
So we mentioned you're 5'10". You're also, it should be obvious for anybody looking at you that you're a wide person, but you're a strong presser. Putting all that together, it leads to a stones question, okay? Mm-hmm. So typically someone who's a very good presser has a wide back, but has shorter arms. It doesn't necessarily mean that your arms are short, but they're not like super long, like in relationship to your torso, right? And so thinking like front to back, if you were to turn sideways, front to back, and stick your arm straight out in front of you, like you're telling somebody to stop, there's not going to be a lot of distance between the end of your chest and the end of your palm if you're like that. So when you go to pick up a stone, it's hard for you. And I was watching a couple of your competitions, and the thing you look like you struggle with was the diameter of the stone.
Yeah.
It's hard for you to get your hands around. So do you just kind of like work on your compressing strength? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like what Coach Dan John calls anaconda strength, where you can just like, okay, I can squeeze in this way really hard because I can't get all the way. I'm like that right now. Yeah. You know what I mean? Is that what you do?
That was my biggest thing, is that I would always just try to, everybody was saying, make your hands as big as possible and get underneath the stone and squeeze and pull in. I didn't really take the squeezing part of it down too well for the beginning of it. And then I saw Martins do it was basically, he had a cable crossover and a stone of steel. You'd put like wrist or ankle straps hooked to the cable, attached to his wrist, and he would go in and just make that squeezing motion, pick up and come back down. I said, you know what, maybe that will help. And so I tried it out and started helping out a lot, to where squeezing it to where I could pull it in, and it made my stone loading a little bit better.
Which is funny because, hold on a second, right? You just said that, right? He just said the words cable crossover. And everybody always like, cable crossover, that's for bodybuilders. But you just pointed out how it's actually can be a functional movement functional, I only train for functional fitness. Well, the cable crossover for you is a functional movement because it helps you better as
Yep.
with your stones. All right, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So my arm span is longer than my height. So they always say your arm span is supposed to be the same as your height. My arm span goes from fingertip to fingertip. I'm 6'3". It's 6'3".
Okay.
I'm 5'10". So I said, well, I should be good at stones since I got longer arms. But then the years of competing in bench and trying to get a bigger chest and bigger shoulders, it started to hinder me.
Right.
So, like you said, putting that arm out from my palm to my chest, it was a short distance.
Right.
And it really made a huge difference in that of trying to pick up stone and getting around it. So it got to the point I said, you know what, I'm not going to train bench as much. As much as I want to be the big barrel chest guy, I said it's actually taking away from stones. So I said, let me back off the bench. My chest deflated a little bit, and it started helping more to where I could lap the stone, get around it, pull it in a lot closer, have that anaconda squeeze, and then get over the bar.
Have you tried doing like some of the yoga poses for thoracic mobility to help you fold around the stone more?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So again, this is a professional strongman. See, I'm somebody watching this is like, I ain't do no yoga. I competed in it. Okay. But so how did that help you in the process of trying to get better at stones?
Anything helps, anything you're not thinking of and somebody throws your way, it helps a lot. And it's funny because, like I said, I trained with Mike Burke, and he would say he did hot yoga. I said, there was a reason behind it. I get it. But he would.
No, I'm just laughing because I know what hot yoga is. I'm picturing this big dude in a room full of other people. Like he was, hi, I'm here for class. And everybody else is like this small. He's like this giant dude. And everybody's like in this hot room. Go ahead.
And he would tell me it would help with, the thoracic, the spine, the stretching and stuff like that. And so I never thought of it. Now, I didn't do hot yoga, but doing the yoga stretches, cat pose, up, downward dog, whatever it all is, all that started helping me to where I felt a little bit more comfortable getting over, releasing the upper back, releasing the lower back, do all that stuff. Because there were times where I would do stones and I pick it up and roll it in. I try to stand straight up, stiff as a board, and it wouldn't work. So it took me a while to have to get used to that. And once I started doing yoga, it helped me contour and conform over the stone. And then when I'm ready to go of, hipping up, throwing everything and putting it over. So yoga helped out a lot. And I haven't done it in a while just because I'm kind of lazy, but I got a kid who likes to jump on me and, so, but yeah, the yoga helps out a lot. Yoga, the older you get, the more things you need to find that what works for you. Yoga, I don't do Pilates, but a lot of stretching. With the home gym, I have softballs, golf balls, everything, and the thorough guns, everything to help me out. And my wife will help me stretch just because it's not always something I could do by myself. And, I'm like, hey, can you come push on me here or get my thigh up here and just lean into my foot to where I can do this.
Right.
So anything that anybody can try to do to help them gain in anything, strength, flexibility, mobility, all that stuff. I literally started doing mobility work, I want to say last year, and it's helped out a lot.
Let's talk about something else because I'm going to just suck all the information out your brain today. You mentioned that you had a chance to go to the Arnold, but you couldn't go because it wasn't, you didn't have the funds for it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a competition budget every year? Like, okay, I can go to this many comps.
It's called my wife.
I got one of those too. I start out the year with big dreams.
Yes.
She brings me back down to earth slowly.
I got to pick and choose my day that I could go see the account manager, and I'm like, so.
Yeah. You're like, okay. So
her biggest thing is we at the beginning of the year we always say she'll say, well, what do you want to do for this year? And we'll sit back and we'll try to find any shows that are coming up. Some will pop up real fast and some will already be there. And so we try to create a budget of what shows I can do and maybe what shows she can go to as well. and we'll look at it from there. Now, the good part about some things is that if it's in a place where ticket prices are cheap, Southwest, let's go. Then we'll look at the hotel, the rental car, and then it's, well, how much am I going to eat while I'm there, and how much are you going to eat? So there's always a budget, and I think if it was limited, if there was no budget for me, I'd probably be doing a lot more shows. So when I went to Finland to compete in the Strongman Champions League, they paid for the hotel, they paid for our food, but to get there was the bigger cost.
Gotcha.
The flight from here to Finland was 1350. So that's a chunk of change where it's like you gotta sit down, talk it over, say, hey, I'm spending $1,350 for one plane ticket there and back. I'm gonna be competing 2 days. I'll be there for 5 days or 4 days. What do you think? We'll have to look at everything, and we'll sit there, we'll go over the food we need in the house, the food that needs me to get to this competition, anything else, if that's going to happen throughout the week or the months that it leads to get there. And so the biggest part about it is that, okay, well, once we start seeing this and we've created that budget, the show that we're looking at is that we'll start saying, okay, well, is there any money involved in this show? Are you going to get anything back? And for a lot of pros, that's what we want to see, is that we're going to get recompensated back, or there's prize money in it, stuff like that. So it's not more of saying, well, I want to compete because it's all for the money. No, it's like, yeah, we want to compete, but the thing is that we're not getting paid to come down to your show, so we want to make sure that there is some money coming back to us just a little bit. Not saying, hey, we need $1,000, but anything helps. The good part about with Dave Waters was, he said, hey, Paul Mauser's chipping in this much money for you guys to come down here. This is going to pay for any traveling fees as much as possible, whatever it is. And to me, I was like, you kidding me? You guys are going to pay me to come? I already got a ticket. Let's go, So that was like one of the bigger things, because there's always, especially with now, COVID, the economy is not the greatest. We're working. Like, I have 2 jobs to support. The second job is to support my strongman habits.
Okay, yeah.
But there's always a budget, and we try to. We all want to do these shows as much as possible, but there's I don't have the money for it. And there's been a couple of shows I've had. I turned down America's Strongest Man just because I didn't have the money for Georgia. And to me, that was a big kick in the knee, just because I wanted to do that show so bad. I trained for it, trained my butt off for it. And I said, you know what, I got this show. I think this would be a great show for me. And about 2 weeks out from the show, I'm sitting there, I'm going through everything. And we had, I want to say, one little expense that came up. I literally sat in my office, and I was the little kid that had his toy taken away on Christmas because I was bad, and it was like,
Wow.
I gotta cry right now. And I was like, I want to compete, but I can't because I don't have the funds. So my wife was like, well, what if I do this? I was like, no, let's not do that. She's like, well, what if I act? No, let's not do that. I'm gonna chalk it up that we just don't have the money for it. So I've done a couple of shows to where I won't be able to make it. So if it's to where maybe when prices go down for flights or whatever, it'll probably be a little bit easier. But yeah, I am literally picking and choosing the shows based off what's in the budget.
Gotcha. That's something that I wanted to go into so that people watching this would kind of can start making plans. Like, okay, you're an amateur, but you need to like be looking ahead. Like, this is what you're
Yeah.
getting into. I want to finish off with a couple of questions because it's Black History Month.
Okay.
Why do you think we haven't had a Black World Strongest Man champion? I know that Mark Felix got 4th once,
Yeah.
but I believe he's come the closest. And we've had so many champions in other sports.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to John Davis in Olympic lifting,
Yeah.
and we've got multiple world record holders in powerlifting, but we've had none in strongman or Highland Games. And I guess maybe what you were saying about cost is part of it, but I'm like, it seems like the implements in the beginning were accessible to get.
Yeah.
Why do you think we've not had even one?
Well, there's me, Mark Felix, Iron BB. So 3 pro strongman that competed worlds or something like that. I really don't know why. The talent is, I don't know if it's because they see a lot of the Scandinavians or anything like that. Yeah, they're strong, but we're just as strong. I with that, I'm not going to put a race or color behind it, because as long as you're doing the work, you're going to be strong. There's nothing to it. With Mark Felix, I look at that guy and meet him personally. He's a giant of a man, super nice guy, and I wish I had his hands, because his hands are, I call them banana hands, just huge.
Yeah,
But
he's actually into grip competitions now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, I think if he had started maybe a little bit early, he would be up there a little bit more. But he's in his 50s and he's still doing great. He's made the finals quite a few times, and so why a black guy hasn't made the champion, yet, I'm not too sure. Uh, it's a goal that I would love to get. I don't know how long I could stay in the sport to get it, just because some of these guys are younger and they're getting super strong, and whatever they're doing, if it's goat's milk that they're drinking over in Poland or Germany or whatever, I need it.
The secret is out. Polish goats. Okay. Polish goat milk. All right. Write that down. All right.
Write that down. But I would love to see, a black guy become world's strongest man. Mark Henry was the first guy to win the Arnold. If he could do it in the Arnold, it could be done in Worlds. I just don't know if it's something that, I don't know if the sport is something that draws a lot of black guys to, as opposed to say basketball or football, stuff like that.
But okay, look, I hear that. All right. But here's what I'm thinking. Hear me out. I accept that a lot of guys are gonna go, they're gonna say, hey man, I'm going to NFL. I ain't gonna do all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I also recognize that the NFL is, the nickname is not for long. So you've got people that go in the NFL, may get in trouble, after a year or 2 years, and they get put out. I mean, they still got their money from that rookie contract, or some of it, right? So that's why I'm like, okay, if it's funding, how come we haven't had anybody leave the NFL and say, okay, well, let me give this a shot, right? It's like, so what is it that's like, because so Marshawn Lynch leaves the NFL, right? Gets bored and decides to get into strongman. He's gonna do well.
Yeah.
And it is still a platform. You can end up, look what Brian Shaw's done with it, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're flying around the world getting paid to lift weird things and eat.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what Strongman fan history was. I watched them eat and I watched them lift weird stuff. So it's interesting to me that I don't see anybody doing it. Instead, what happens is they go to the WWE.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And I wonder if it's because they still want that fame, that limelight of staying in something like that, which to me, again, that's WWE. It's another one that's not going to last long. You can take a tumble, and
that's a grind too, because you're every weekend you're doing something.
Every week. So to me, that's not as beneficial as to say, like, let's go to strongman. There's a guy plays for the Rams. He's a defensive tackle. Daniel. His last name is either Daniel or first name is Daniel. The guy is a monster, and I've seen him flip tires. Same with James Harrison. Those two guys alone, I could see going into World's Strongest Man.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they already do the movements in training.
Exactly.
So I'm like, I don't understand.
Why not just say, you know what? I've had my time in the NFL. I've done great. I'm done with concussions. Let's move over. Why they don't do it, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
My biggest thing is, I said, if I ever made it to the NFL, it was like, all right, I'm going to stay. I'm not going to be the busybody. I'm going to do my thing, and then I'm going to have fun, and then move on. Like, when I did semi-pro, I was like, I played from little league all the way up to college. Time to move on. Okay, I did semi-pro, had my fun. It's getting boring. Time to move on. That's when I started picking up strongman. So I would love to see a lot of guys do it more. I would love to see a lot more black guys do it more. There was, I want to say, 2 other guys at the Mammoth show, and one was giant of a man. I looked up at him and I said, well, that's fun. So another
I
guy
think I know
was
you're talking about. That was
yeah.
actually his first show last. If it's who you're, if you're talking about who I think you're talking about, his first competition was the Mammoth 4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he's still fairly young in the sport.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jeez.
So it's cool that you met him. He got to no, and I'm saying it's cool that you met him because he got to see a professional, a black
Yeah,
guy who's a professional. Since that's what we're talking about,
yeah.
you get to see another black guy who's a professional who's doing it. So you probably inspired him, to be
I
honest with
hope so. I mean, I find this sport so fun that it's just it as even though I'm a pro, I call it my job, but the biggest part about it is that you know what? How many jobs you get to say you go in, you lift something heavy, put it down, and you walk away, and then people could come up to you and say, "How much was that?" You can gloat about it, you can be proud about it, stuff like that. As a bouncer, I don't go to my job and they're like, "Hey, did you just throw that guy out?" Yeah, and I got puked on in the process.
you.
It's
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
that's not something you like doing. So, but with this, it's that I always tell guys, like, dude, give it a shot, just give it a whirl. You're gonna feel so. I can't explain how you're gonna feel because it's functional training every single day. You know, with me and my wife, when she comes home with groceries, I'm like, hey, baby, you need help? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. She's like, I'll come back and help. Dad, don't worry about
No,
it.
no, man.
One trip.
That's
you
right.
know?
That's a
So
man law. One trip.
so I'm like, I'm practicing farmers. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's stuff like that we always see our black guys in the gym pushing hard. I'm like, put it to use. Go do the strongman. Go do the powerlifting. Go do stuff like that. Make it fun for yourself. Don't just be that. I know some people don't like the word meathead, but don't be a meathead that just goes into the gym, wears the spaghetti strap shirts, and then
Yeah.
flexing, and everybody's like,
Zubaz.
yeah,
Zubaz ugly pants. Yeah.
with the bandana on the jacket.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
don't be that guy.
yeah.
Put it to good use, and you're gonna love this sport or any kind of sport that you do. Um, a buddy of mine who actually competed in the Masters Nationals, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, and he's always asking, "What are you gonna do when you can't do this anymore?" No, I'm still gonna be doing this. He's like, "Well, why don't you try BJJ?" And I'm like, I did grappling when I was in high school, so maybe I could do BJJ. So he's like, you should try it. So that's a thing there.
Yeah.
There's always something that I want to continue to do, and it's not just be in the weight room lifting. Uh, but I do want to see it. I do want to see our first black guy win worlds. Who it's going to be, I don't know. So
Okay. Well, Stan, man, I really appreciate it. I know that you don't post a whole lot of training on your Instagram profile, but I know that people do want to follow you. And I don't know if you do it like so that your competitors don't know how you're doing, so they can't like train for you. But I do know that people want to keep up with your training. So how can people follow you and keep up with your training and see where you're going to be next?
yeah, the only social media I have right now is on Instagram, and it's Stanley Stanley built Built. So one word, Stanley built.